It's my honor to be here this morning to talk about the new anti-doping code, which is a new era in sports and anti-doping in the world. The World Anti-Doping Code, and not the WADA code, has been around for some time, and we need to be aware of what the code is, where is WADA, what is WADA, and the changes to the World Anti-Doping Code and what we call the new era. So the mission of WADA is globally to promote, coordinate, and monitor the fight against doping in all its forms. And as I mentioned, is an international agency and funded by the sport and government, and a developer and custodian of the World Anti-Doping Code. And this is the issue this is one of the major benefits and issues that WADA has been able to develop this code. As I said, it is not the WADA code, it is the World Anti-Doping Code. And this came out of a number of submissions made by anti-doping organizations, which are the NADOs, the RADOs, the Olympic federations, countries, governments in sport over the years. And they've now come up with this body. It's not the first code. The first code was about in 2003, and then it was revised in 2009, and now this is the new revised code, which becomes effective in 2015. The new code makes it, as it says, athlete friendly, but it makes it tougher on the real cheats. The new code now has a 4-year ban on the real cheats, as they call it, for intentional doping. And I'll tell you what intentional doping is. Other cases, there is greater flexibility in the which is, you can have 4 years, you can have more or less, depending on circumstances. And intentional doping is where that athlete knows that he was taking a drug. He knew he was involved in an anti-doping rule violation. He knew that there was significant risk that the conduct might constitute or result in what you would call a positive test, which what we call is an anti-doping rule violation. Anti-doping rule violations is where the test comes back, a test comes back positive, but then there's investigations to determine, there's an adverse analytical finding, and then investigations are used to determine whether it violates the rules of doping. And your brochure there tells you what doping is. If there are more than one violation, there's a clear format. The problem with the old code was that if you were tested positive for more than one substance, or if you were tested positive for one substance and then another substance, it was not clear. For an athlete or other person's second anti-doping rule violation, the period of ineligibility shall be the greater of 6 months, or 1/2 of the period of ineligibility imposed by the first sanction, without taking any reduction as in another article, or twice that period of ineligibility, where the second rule is treated as if it were the first, without taking into account the other. So if someone is banned for 2 years and then a second substance, then you may want to take 1 year to add on to that, or so on. Or twice, depends on the circumstance. In looking at the sanctions, you look at the substance that's involved, the type of the anti-doping rule violation that was breached, whether it was possession, trafficking, or whatever, whether it's a first or second offense, and the degree of fault, how liable that person was, and other certain non-fault related factors. So it's not one rule for everyone. There are a lot of factors that are taken in various situations, and there's also a possibility of reduction in specific circumstances. In looking at the sanctions, you look at the substance that's involved, the type of the anti-doping rule violation that was breached, whether it was possession, trafficking, or whatever, whether it's the first or second offense, and the degree of fault, how liable that person was, and other certain non-fault relating factors. So it's not one rule for everyone. There are a lot of factors that are taken in various situations, and there's also a possibility of reduction in specific circumstances. We just saw the Tyson Gay situation, which, although this is not put into place, people have questioned why Tyson Gay got a different sanction to other athletes who were tested positive around the same time. And the USADA put some of these into place in making that determination. He admitted and also cooperated when he was tested positive. Missed tests or filing failures. There's something called ADAMS, the Anti-Doping Administration and Management System. And athletes are required to be in, or I would say that where they are, various locations. And right now, if you miss a test, or you're not where you should be 3 times in 18 months, that's also an anti-doping rule violation. That has been reduced to 3 times in 12 months. So it's a little more stricter there. Or not filing saying where you are supposed to be in that period of time. Prohibited association is something that has not been stressed as much as it should have been, and is being emphasized in the new code in Article 210, where an athlete cannot associate professionally with someone who is sanctioned or an athlete support personnel. If that person is serving a period of ineligibility, or if that person has been convicted or found in a criminal or disciplinary or professional proceeding to have engaged in a conduct which may have constituted violation of anti-doping rules. And this could disqualify you for the longer of 6 years from the decision of the sanction. So if a coach, for instance, has been involved in anti-doping and this athlete is still attending this coach or associating with the coach, it can cause problems. Or if the person is found to be a front or intermediary for an individual as described before. The athlete support personnel are more liable in the new code. The coaches, trainers, doctors, physios, managers, even the National Olympic Committees, whatever. And this is important because the athlete's name is called, and these people always get away free to go and continue to do what they're doing. There's a responsibility of the national anti-doping organizations, international federations, and national Olympic committees to have their national federations, athlete support personnel bound to the anti-doping rules. And the Barbados Olympic Association has done that, and prior to Commonwealth Games, all athlete support personnel had to sign a contract where they were bound to the anti-doping rules. There's also, in addition, an automatic investigation if that athlete support person, the rule violation involves a minor, or if they've been proven to support more than one athlete who has committed anti-doping rule violation. A lot of debate in the various stages of development of this code did involve persons submitting what should be on and what should not be, or the criteria for the list. It was agreed eventually that it will remain how it is now. You must meet 2 of the 3 criteria. The substance must have the potential to, or actually enhance sport performance, or have an actual or potential health risk to the athlete, or contrary to the spirit of sport, which is spirit of sport, the true spirit of sport. Also, prior to the code, and in order to help to make this continue, the rules for the marijuana use have been relaxed a bit, where the threshold for reporting of marijuana now is 150 nanograms from 15 nanograms. Some people still believe marijuana is not performance enhancing, so therefore it shouldn't be on the list. Some people believe it doesn't have a health risk to athletes. Some people do, so it has remained on the list. But in order to get this to be passed, this had to be relaxed a bit. In other words, you have to be smoking marijuana currently to have, as you know, marijuana can stay in the system for up to a month after its use. Intelligence and investigations have been added to the testing protocol, and this is where resources now have to be added, and we have made overtures to the authorities who will need to help us in intelligence. The anti-doping organizations are able to need to be able to obtain, access, and process doping intelligence from all available sources. So the police, defense force, immigration, customs, post office, in order to plan target testing and to establish potential anti-doping rule violations. We must also be able to conduct effective investigations and gathering information, both analytical and non-analytical evidence in support of the anti-doping rule violation. And you would have been aware that there have been some persons who have been sanctioned who did not come back with what you would call a positive test. Non-analytical positives have been sanctioned internationally now because of intelligence. Other changes to the code is persons who retire. There may be athletes who will retire and they will be in the registered testing pool. There will be like the national athletes who might want to retire. And then Nicky might say he wants to come back and compete again. He needs now to give 6 months notice before returning to competition. So you could check him, he might be out there doping all the time. Not Nicky, but someone else. So you just can't just wake up and say, oh gosh, CSC coming up, I've been swimming good, so I'm going. You need to give 6 months notice. And although WADA could grant an exemption where strict applicability of the rule would be unfair in some situations.
Testing of athletes in a final. I specifically want to deal with track and field. Is it mandatory that messers 1, 2, and 3, or ladies 1, 2, and 3 are mandatorily tested? Let's establish that first.
In the Olympic Games, where money is not an issue, as say even in Commonwealth Games, they test 1, 2, 3, and 4, and one of the losing finalists. Reason for 4 is that if 1, 2, and 3 tested positive, then 4 goes up. So they do 5 per final event. They also do during the preliminaries and also pre-games testing. And pre-games testing starts from the day that the village is open until the day the village closes. So even though you may not be in the country, all athletes now have to give their whereabouts of where they are in pre-Olympic training. As you know, in the games, for instance, London, some people were in Edinburgh, some people were in Manchester, some people were in various parts of Europe training. So they needed to let the athletes know, the IOC know, or UK anti-doping know where they were, so they could be testing. For these games in Glasgow, we also needed to let our anti-doping people know, and some countries were in violation of this because at the medical meeting in Glasgow, it was said that a question was asked by a team physician, what happens because the doping control officers came to our country's location for our athletes, and our athletes were not yet in Glasgow? Was that considered a mistest? And Dr. Jaga, who is from Malaysia and the chairman of the Medical Commission of CGF's, Commonwealth Games Federation, said that no, they're not going to apply as strict as that. But the country said that the athletes were supposed to be in Glasgow and they didn't arrive until 2 or 3 days after. And it caused some anxiety amongst the competitors as well as officials. So they did not implement the missed testing because, and I know for a fact that they went even more than once for athletes who had not yet arrived there. So it's important, yeah, the travel difficulties. Even in Glasgow, as Pamela will tell you, some of the connections from Barbados to Glasgow were very tight, and some people missed their connections.
There were swimmers trying to get out of Trinidad to get there for the Caribbean Swimming Championships, and Cal was not flying, so it being a 45-minute flight from Trinidad.
Right. So there were some problems, but nowadays, and I have on my phone, there is an app where you can update your whereabouts. No. No, for the athletes, and I downloaded it on my phone, but there's an app now for all Androids where you can now update your whereabouts. So if you are trapped in Iraq or in Missouri because of problems there or whatever, you can update them and say, well, I am here at airport or airport hotel, or you have to overnight, because it's important. And the athletes do it. All West Indies cricketers do have to give whereabouts. And they need to do it 3 months in advance to the ICC. Now, what happens? How do they know where they will be? Does Darren Sammy know where he will be in 3 months' time? Does he know if he will be playing, if he will be selected? Right? But they do have persons in Antigua that quickly update those events for the ICC, because the ICC works with the RADO. And from time to time, not only West Indian cricketers, but the visiting teams are sometimes either targeted or are requested to have tested, test not in the competition, or when they arrive in the Caribbean. Test is informed of where they're staying, who is coming. And you had a situation where one of the cricketers selected had not been with the team, something like that. One of the teams.
They were, they had not, their name was on a mission order, but they were somewhere else.
Yeah.
Because of some difficulty
right.
at the other end.
Right. So technically could be a missed test, but there were circumstances, and they had to, ICC in Dubai had to then substitute someone else. Because they do give us specific names sometimes, or the match referee, in the case of the match, would oversee the selection of the 2 athletes two cricketers per team when they're here.
Additionally, if I'm out of some jurisdiction I'm supposedly in, do I have a list as an athlete of, this is your nearest Adidas outlet, you find one at Shepherd's Bush, you know, are there, the app and the stuff you were talking about, their technology available that if they have to check in with somebody to do a test, it's supposed to be X place, Y place, you're not, or
no, it doesn't.
Check in.
Right. I remember Obadeli, whenever he was in Barbados, he used to call me and, Doc, I'm here, in case you need me. But no, you don't need to do that. I think you go about your business, you don't worry about anti-doping at all, only if called. However, if there is changes to where you have to be, then you can insert through the Adams, either through your computer, through your phone, make a phone call. And some of the cricketers have designated persons to do it on their behalf, because they might not be able to or might not be willing to do the updates themselves. And I know of some of the cricketers who have designated persons, the agents, who may put in these things. And I guess the same thing in the case of athletes. Dubai. Those are for persons in what's called a registered testing pool. The problem that we face in Barbados is that we, as the National Anti-Doping Commission, and Patrina and Sasha, who works part-time with the National Anti-Doping Commission, which we didn't really highlight, she works in 2 jobs, half-half, supposedly. 3? Football? But our national federations have not been giving information to the National Anti-Doping Commission. In order for us to do the WADA RADO out of competition test, we need whereabouts. TESA has to print mission orders. You just can't go and turn up and do a test, Martin. Or Ryan. Right. No. We have to have whereabouts. For instance, and I probably shouldn't say it publicly, but I read in yesterday's paper that there's a national bodybuilding championships next weekend. I said, oh, good. Intelligence. That is intelligence. Okay? So, should we go and test them this weekend? It would be a good idea. Because they know that championships is next weekend, so they may be bulking up for next weekend. So it would not be a bad idea to go and test them. But had we had that information, knowing that the championships would be on the 30th, knowing what's going on, we could have gone and jumped them and tested them. So things like that, the National Anti-Doping Commission does. But in order to do that, we need to have whereabouts. We need to send it to TESA, or else we have to use our limited funds that we have from the National Anti-Doping Commission to use it. WADA still has a few dollars left back in the kitty for 2014 grant, and so Barbados plans to use a few more of those dollars rather than take up the National Anti-Doping Commission NSC money that obviously has been cut to use. So if we will use that first and use those funds for other things if possible. So.